Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update, brought to you by Ag Carolina Farm Credit. Well, in this week's video, we're going to focus primarily on what the flow pattern is doing, because right now it is unblocked. And what that means is we're going to see a consistent trough ridge pattern moving across the country. So the colder weather we've got locked in now, we will be seeing that move out by the time we get into next week, and that's what an unblocked pattern does. Now, because multiple shortwave troughs are going to swing around the broader trough, it's going to be a very, very wet week from eastern Texas all the way up to the northeast part of the United States with snow on the backside of this. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But what I wanted to do at the end of the video is give you a brand new update for what the rest of winter is going to look like. And we're also going to talk a little bit about South America, which is quite important to Carolina agriculture this time of year. So let's dig on into this. First thing to start off with, let's look at August through October in terms of statewide temperature ranks and precipitation ranks. So on the 124-year record, we kind of saw a pattern look something like this, keeping things quite warm down here in the southeast, but also very, very wet in the eastern third of the country. And I'm showing you this because we're going to be continuing to see wetter conditions evolve at least over the next 7 days. Now, at the same time it was so wet out east, that larger ridge kept things very dry out west, with California having its 15th driest time period on record from August to October, and we're looking over the last 124 years. As a consequence, we've seen these incredible fires that have broken out. We've had this strong offshore flow that has really made for just some horrific fires. And these are the ones that were in Southern California. So we're down here near LA watching these huge fires kind of push offshore like this. And then we saw these in Northern California. So this is looking back about 5 days ago, or 4 or 5 days ago. You can see the progression over the last few days of how bad the fires were. And look at the air quality issues that they're having. You know, our friends in California right now are really suffering with some horrific fire events. Thankfully, as we progressed through the weekend, things started to improve, but still having a major firefight out west at this time. And just to kind of show you the overall flow out there, what's going on is the offshore flow is just pushing that smoke on off to the open Pacific, but this is bad because the airflow goes right over the top of the mountains, descends the mountains, dries out, and causes the really harsh conditions that basically provoke these fires, which is extremely low relative humidity and very fast winds. Well, the ridge that is sitting out west, while there's a deeper trough here over the east, well, you're going to have to watch this pattern evolve such that that trough moves east and this broader ridge moves east. That's an unblocked pattern. So I have some positive changes on the way for California. But in the meantime, while we're sitting in this deeper trough over here of the Carolinas, repeated chances of showers and storms. So let's take a look at what we're watching here. First things first, I'm going to show you what the all hazards weather map looks like for early in the morning on Monday. So this will be the 12th. And because, you know, we certainly share some crops that are grown here in the Carolinas with what happens over here in Texas, you can see we have a large area here we're watching for some snowfall. In fact, winter storm warnings in the panhandle of Texas. So we talk about cotton and peanuts and winter wheat. These are some of the crops that are being affected right now. But look at these deep freeze warnings getting all the way down into central Texas. While the weather system that is causing this is moving toward the Carolinas, and that's what we have to talk about. Now, first off, look at how much snow we're expecting to see out of this system. We have some places there in the panhandle of Oklahoma and Texas that may get 4, 5, 6 inches out of this, hence the winter storm warning. But what I really want you to understand is, what is the flow pattern that's set up to give us this? So here's a little bit of meteorology 101. You know, I always talk about troughs and ridges in these videos, and I want to talk specifically about tilt. You see, if the trough pattern does something like this, we call this a positive tilt. Do you see how the line I just drew through there looks like the / on your keyboard? Well, whenever we have a positive tilt to the trough tends to slow down and it tends to dig to the south and east, and hence it brings in a lot of cold air that kind of sticks around. Now, if the trough has a negative tilt to it like this, looks like a /, these are the troughs that tend to lift, and as they do so can create very, very large and powerful low pressure systems. Now, why discuss that? Well, here's the reason. We've got right now both. You see the positive tilt on this trough and the negative tilt on that trough. This trough here going through the Great Lakes is going to race on off to the northeast, and as it does so, drag a big cold front here through the southeast, soaking the Carolinas for the beginning of this week. Then our second trough, which is here, is slowly going to move through Texas and then come right up the East Coast again, giving us another major rainfall event here toward the middle and end of the week. But the last thing I want to point out before I animate this forward is, see this larger ridge? You will see that slowly progressing to the east with time. So I'm going to get rid of all my drawings here and let me play this one forward for you. Ready? Here goes the animation. All right. See the first trough swing through the Great Lakes? That's going to be the one that kicks off the big system by the time we get into Monday and Tuesday. That's going to drag our front through the Carolinas, giving us our first chance of precipitation. Now, see the second trough sitting down here with its positive tilt. That one swings through later in the week, right there, giving us the second chance for precipitation through the Carolinas. And then as we continue to progress forward, that cold air finally looks like it's going to shove out around the 18th, 19th as this broader ridge moves in. You see, this is unblocked flow, and I've got some very good news for our friends out in California. Step this back. A week from now, we will be seeing this cutoff low swinging through, finally bringing in the chances for some rain out west as well. So there's a lot going on in this pattern. Let's see the end result of all of it, though. Here we go. First system. Ready? There it is. By the time we get into Monday, we're watching it spread through Texas, getting into the southern states there in the southern Mississippi River Valley, and then over toward the Carolinas by the end of the day on Monday into Tuesday morning. And that one sweeps on through its cold front by the time we get through the day on Wednesday. So that's round number one. Now remember, at this same time, there's that trough hanging out over there in Texas. Here we go. Here we get into Wednesday morning. Now watch this. By the time we get into Wednesday afternoon, see the second system kind of curl up just like this? Well, that is system number 2, goes through and soaks the Carolinas again before it moves on off to the north and east. It will be, well, probably not until the beginning of next week that we finally start to develop a big area of higher atmospheric pressure over here, calming things down and giving us some return flow and possibly some warmth by the time we start to approach Thanksgiving. But when you put this all together, we have a lot of rain coming up for the Carolinas in the next 7 days. So this gets you all the way out to next Sunday night. And what I see here is widespread 2 to possibly over 5 inches of rainfall for the Carolinas. And that's what happens when you have 2 big systems that are going to swing through in the near term. Okay, if we stretch this out a little longer, let me give you the 10-day forecast. So now we're out to the 21st of November. We see the flow patterns doing something like this. All right. And this is the ridge that will slowly be moving back into the middle part of the country and off to the east. So the colder weather you see right now, this is looking at the day 5 through day 10 temperature patterns here. This colder weather will be exiting by the time we get into midweek next week, and the warmer weather out west will be moving in. To show you that, let me go all the way out to day 15. Here's the flow pattern by the time we get to day 15. You see, at that point, we've now moved the warmer weather back into the U.S., into the central U.S., I should say, and eastern U.S. But I'll tell you this, if that trough hangs out like this, and this is our new flow pattern, this is going to, again, be quite active in terms of our storm track. And I think that's something we should be talking about longer term. So here's your latest update from the long-range European model, which is the superior model when it comes to doing long-range forecasting. December, January, February. We are seeing a flow pattern that will more than likely favor something like this. And if that's the case, this area that I'm kind of circling here on all 3 of these maps has the greatest, risk of having some cooler than average temperatures throughout this winter. Now, I am not calling for one of those bitterly cold winters for the southeast, but it looks pretty robust that we could have warmer than average conditions out west in the northern United States, with our best chances of having some cooler weather stretching down here from Texas all the way up to the northeast. Now, with that flow pattern, things look wet as well. And so this has been a pretty consistent picture that's been painted here. We've looked at it in terms of analog support, and also now we've seen it here in our long-range dynamical models. So this looks to be the way winter is going to shape up at this point. Now, there's always uncertainty and there's always variability, but overall, this is our current pattern we're seeing right now, supported by our long-range models and by our analog forecasts. We'll take you quickly down to South America because certainly ag in the Carolinas is related to what goes on in both Brazil and Argentina. The Brazilian monsoon has been going just fine throughout the last month or so. You'll take a look at that in a few minutes. But look at these storms blowing up down here in Argentina, right where they grow a lot of corn and soybeans there in Argentina near Cordoba. In fact, when this happened, they had some huge hail in Cordoba here. You can see it compared to the size of some eggs. Massive hail. We got a big project down there right now called Relampago. A bunch of universities are down there studying storms like this. Well, they certainly got a great set of storms the last couple of days, but the destruction has been quite bad. Now, let me show you something. We care a lot about what goes on in Brazil, not only for soybeans, but also for cotton. And they've had a very wet start to their growing season, but this is good. Well, good for them. A wet start to the growing season means they got in early, and this means that the potential is there for having a couple of big crops, both corn, soybeans, and cotton coming out of Brazil. Argentina looks to continue to be wet over the next 15 days, with most of Brazil's growing regions looking wet as well, except for the eastern area right over here. Now, just to tell you about longer term here, because of this weak El Nino, we've discussed it in several videos, okay? This weak El Nino that's developing here in the equatorial Pacific, it is more likely to see wetter than average conditions down here in Argentina throughout much of winter, with possibly drier than average conditions in Brazil's northern growing regions, but the uncertainty is very high. And right in here in the middle, this is the area that's the wild card. We're going to have to keep a very, very close eye on that. So I want to at least give you some international perspective here on some weather that's affecting other growing regions, which are closely related to the agriculture we got going on in the Carolinas. But with that, though, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this forecast video. We at Ag Carolina, thank you for watching. Hope you look forward to our next forecast coming out next week. Thank you.